So when I was 10 years old, I became an atheist, and I hated God and I hated Christians. And by the time I was 16, it was the first time I'd ever encountered the presence of God, the God I didn't believe in. And it was so overwhelming to be in the presence of God and to know that it was God. The song's about that experience. It's called All Around Me.
Towards you, I feel you on my fingertips. My tongue dances behind my lips for you. This fire rises through my being, burning. I'm not used to seeing you. Never lied. I'm still alive. I can feel you all around me, tickling me, and I'm breathing, holding on to what I'm feeling, tumbling this bullshit. Slid off above me, and you whisper you love me, and I begin to fade into a secret place. The music makes me sway. The angels sing and say we are with you. And I can feel you all around me, tickling me, and I'm breathing, holding on to what I'm feeling, savoring this bullshit. I'm still alive. I'm so alive. I can feel you all around me, tickling me, and I'm breathing, holding on to what I'm feeling, savoring this heart. Take me and I give it to you. Now you own me, all I am. You said you would never leave me. I believe you. I believe. I feel you all around me, tickling me, and I'm breathing, holding on to what I'm feeling, savoring this whole serious.
So like I was saying earlier about when I was 10, I became an atheist. When I was little, my mom talked to me about God. We were having a lot of struggles coming up. My mom was a teen mom. She was a single mom with 6 kids at one point, and we saw so many miracles of how God took care of us. We saw so much provision. We had no money. My mom got food stamps, and at the time she just was such a generous person. She just kept giving our food stamps away, and we would have no food, and then somebody would give us food, and I just thought, oh sure, yeah, there's a God, he feeds us. How else would we eat? And then I was watching 700 Club. I don't know what that is. Pat Robertson was on. It was really late. I was the only one up in the house. And he was doing a special. They were doing a special about children in Somalia who are starving. And you know, my mom really taught us compassion for people who are hungry. And they were they were asking for money for these people. And I wanted so much to help them. And I was 10 years old, I was 10 years old, and I said, I wish I could help, but I don't have any money. So Pat Robertson said, if you don't have money, you can at least call. If you've never known Jesus, Jesus loves children. He loves people. So you can call the number and give your life to Jesus. So I said, I want to do that. So I called and prayed with somebody to give my life to Jesus who loved children. And that same year, my 3-year-old cousin, who was really close to me, was beaten to death by his stepfather. And when that happened, I couldn't reconcile. How could God, who loves children, let that happen? Someone so innocent. And I thought, I'm not going to believe in God. And I quit believing. And from the time I was 10 until I was 16, I was a very hateful atheist. I hated people. I hated people for being happy because this world is sick and messed up, so sick, and how can you be happy in a world where children get beaten to death? I hated people who talked about God and Jesus because I was so hurt by what happens. Felt lied to, and I thought, it's not loving to lie to somebody and say there's a God when people die like that. That's hateful, and I hated Christians. And I didn't ever feel welcome in a church where everybody had a mom and a dad and they dressed nice. I didn't ever know my dad. I didn't have nice clothes. I felt awkward in church. And so I didn't like Christians. I didn't like church. I didn't like this whole thing. I hated people. And I made a commitment in my heart to be sad for my cousin's sake. Because I thought, why wasn't it me? How come he died and I'm still here? And so I just wanted to be sad for him all the time. And if I would catch myself being happy, I would say, no, I have to be sad. And I would never get close to people on purpose because I didn't want to be happy. And if I accidentally fell into a deep relationship, I would cling onto it with everything in me because that was the closest I could get to God because I didn't believe in God. So I would make people God. And it is too much weight to make somebody a God. That is not fair to them. They can't be God. Only God can be God. So over and over, they would let me down. My heart would be broken, and I would hate people all over again. And I hated this idea of sin. Tell me I'm sinning, I'm going to do it even more because I don't want you to control my life. And so the fact is that sin is anything that kills your spirit. You are not just a body. You are a spirit. And sin leads to death. And we don't realize that we are a spirit. And so what I didn't know I was doing, just like when you smoke, you don't realize it. I'm not saying anything about smokers. I'm just saying, we know when you smoke, it hurts your lungs. You don't see it. But we know, we've seen pictures of black lungs. And the thing is, when you sin, it kills your spirit. And we don't see it. So we keep diving in because it feels good for a minute, and we keep diving in because we feel bad afterwards. We do it again, and we feel good for a minute, and we do it again. Do something else. Seems better. And the thing is, we get so tired and achy, and we just start to hate ourselves. And we try to work so hard to defend our sins because we don't want anybody to control us, but we still feel achy and empty and tired because that's what sin does. And by the time I was 16, I was so exhausted and tired and could not keep myself happy for anything. And I decided I didn't want to live anymore. And I planned to commit suicide. As an atheist, I don't have any reason to keep living if I'm not happy. So I'm just going to end it. And when the dad planned to commit suicide, I came home from school, and my grandmother was supposed to be in the hospital with my grandfather who was having a heart attack. And I used that as another excuse to be sad because I used anything I could to make it about me. Oh, my life is falling apart. Look, my grandpa's in the hospital. Look at all this terrible stuff happening to me. I'm just a burden to the people around me. I made it a noble thing. I'm making his life harder. So I'm just going to take my life. And as I made that plan,